Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So following on from my ranking of all the horror films I've seen in this past year, I recently put a poll up on my community page and asked you guys if you also wanted to see a ranking of non-horror films that I've seen in the past 12 months. And the vote was pretty much unanimous, as I remember. I think pretty much everyone voted yes, that you wanted to see me do a ranking of non-horror films, films outside of that genre that I do talk about a lot on this channel. Horror is one of the topics of the channel. And because you guys wanted to see this, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing another list, and this time you're going to get a sense of films I like outside of the horror genre. And there's a mixture here, I think, of films that I was curious about, along with films that I just really wanted to see. You're going to get some independent films, some big blockbusters here. You're going to get a real mix. And it'll give you a sense, hopefully, of the kind of things that I like in films versus the things I don't like. And it's not just going to be those kind of things that come up time and again in horror films. And you're going to get some hot takes here, so be ready, strap yourselves in with your drink of choice and be ready for this list. From my least favourite to my favourite, there are 12 films here to get through. So let's start with my least favourite film of this past year at my number 12. That is Miller's Girl, directed by Jade Bartlett, starred Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. This film is kind of odd, really. I mean, you have it tackling quite a risky subject matter, you know, an age gap between the older man and the younger girl, but the film doesn't really take any risks, which feels counterintuitive with this sort of a film. And, you know, I thought the performances were okay, but they also never felt really convincing given the subject matter here as well and the sort of the dramatic elements of this film. Nothing really quite landed, and therefore Miller's Girl just fell very flat ultimately, and that's why it's at the bottom of my list at number 12. Coming in next at number 11, we've got The Idea of You, which starred Anne Hathaway, and I thought she was really good in this film, actually. I will say that up front. But for me, this isn't my kind of a rom-com. I actually quite like some rom-coms, and there are some rom-coms from days gone by that I actually really enjoy watching. But this rom-com for me just felt a little bit on the shallow side. I can see why certain people or, you know, certain audiences might like this one more than I do. But yeah, it just didn't really, again, another film that fell a bit flat for me personally. It didn't really feel kind of much substance in this relationship, actually, despite what it was going for and what it was trying to achieve. So The Idea of You comes in at number 11. Next up at number 10, we've got Blink Twice, which I did actually quite appreciate and like as a film. Very strong kind of feminist statement about this film with this group of people. They're invited to a remote private island by a billionaire tech mogul. And the more the film goes on, the darker it gets and the more the sort of darker elements, particularly of the male group of characters, are revealed. It's sort of obviously saying something about, I think, you know, men and when they have a lot of privileges and power. And, you know, I thought that there was, like I say, the film is certainly sort of trying to make that strong statement, and I think somewhat achieving that. But for me, it was some of the core elements of the film that didn't quite work. I wasn't totally convinced by all of the ways that the characters in this film were written, and they were really all that convincing in some of the performances as well. And for me, therefore, because of that and the execution of the film not quite being on point, I just felt Blink Twice just didn't quite work again for me. So that's why Blink Twice comes in at number 10. Next up at number 9, we've got Twisters, a disaster film, and what everyone was calling the return of the summer blockbuster. For me, I'm not quite sure about that. I did think it was a fun time, and I thought that Glenn Powell was pretty good as the tornado wrangler, Tyler Owens. But overall, this film, if you strip back the effects, I think, and it was just very, sort of, to me, a bit too glossy for what it was doing. I enjoy the grit and the originality of the first film and just how that felt as a movie. This one, as a blockbuster, just a bit too overblown for me, and that's rather appropriate when we are talking about tornadoes, that a film like this should maybe end up being a little bit overblown, ironically. Coming in next at number 8, we have got a definite hot take. So if Twisters being at number 9 wasn't controversial, I think It Ends With Us being above it at 8 is definitely going to be controversial. But here's the thing, I'm honest with these videos and these rankings, and whether you love or hate It Ends With Us, then, you know, whatever your opinion is of that film, you've got to respect the fact this is my ranking, and I will say exactly what I think. about these films. I will not try and cater to people. This is my view on these films. And yes, I understand there was a lot of controversy surrounding this film, the marketing of the film, the subject matter of the film, Blake Lively. It seems an awful lot of noise surrounding her and her behaviour off set and behind the scenes, sometimes historically. But I'm talking about the film itself here, not about all of that, not about all the behind the scenes stuff. Put that to one side. There's an element of separating the art from the artist with all these sorts of things. In particular with this film, I think the film itself, actually, I thought was quite good. And Justin Baldoni, as director, I thought did quite a good job. There's some visual flair about the film. I actually think the performances are pretty convincing. I think the darkness of the film does still come through, and the sort of, the way that the darker aspects of that main character are gradually revealed throughout the film, I actually think is quite cleverly done. So yes, you're going to have your haters of this film, and I somewhat understand why some people hate this film, or at least the behind the scenes stuff, but I like to look at a film on its own and try to ignore online noise and vitriol and controversies sometimes, because you want to see the film for what it is. It is a film. And I actually thought that, for the most part, this was pretty decent. It ends with us. Here I am defending this film. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I don't think it's a great film even, but I think it's pretty solid for what it is, and that's why it is my number 8. Coming in next at number 7, we got Civil War, directed by Alex Garland. A pretty good sort of action thriller with this group of war journalists travelling from New York to Washington DC, with obviously a very divided US, and that is, I think, represented quite well in this film. What I really like, though, in this film is actually the cameo of Jesse Plemons, who is on screen for a pretty short space of time, but the time he's on screen, he absolutely steals this film and steals the show, really. And that's why Civil War is at number 7, partly. It's why it's not super high on my list, but it's pretty high, I think, given that I don't think the rest of the film is necessarily anything that amazing. Some good action sequences, but apart from that, it's Jesse Plemons that is the reason this has made it up to number 7. Coming in at number 6, we've got We Live in Time, which is a romantic comedy. For me, the better rom-com than the one that was lower down on my list, The Idea of You. I think We Live in Time has a lot of charm to it. It's genuine, it has a warmth about it, because at the heart of it is actually a tragic tale, I think, about a couple with one of them is suffering from cancer. And the way the film sensitively handles that and its comical aspects is extremely delicate and well done, so that you feel like you are living with the characters in their time, as per the title of the film, We Live in Time. For me, one criticism I have of this, it's why We Live in Time is at number 6 and not a bit higher on my list, is just that it felt clunky the way it was sequenced. The way it jumps from back and forth in the time sequences of their lives was, for me, a little bit off-putting at times, but I get it. It's a really good film overall. And the last shot of this film, the camera shot of Florence Pugh, is one of the most haunting camera shots I can think of that I've seen in a film, certainly this year, fairly recently, and it's actually a pretty stunning little film. So I think this one is coming out more widely, perhaps in other countries early next year. So do check out We Live in Time if you get the opportunity to. That is my number 6. Coming in next at number 5, we've got Skincare, which stars Elizabeth Banks. I think she is... Sorry, did I say number 6? Number 5, Skincare, starring Elizabeth Banks. And this is another independent film. This was actually one I saw at the BFI Film Festival, and I thought it was very, very good. I really enjoyed it. It's a thriller. Elizabeth Banks is playing a character who is a beautician, and she's got a rival beautician that's sort of working across the road. Lots of tensions build up, and you sort of sense suspicions, and you're sort of seeing everything, and you can sense where the twist is going to happen, I think, in this film. But what I really like about it is actually just, to be honest, it's the visual style, it's the music, the use of music. Actually, this film was directed by Austin Peters, who has a history of directing music videos, so you can see how that works well, and his skill and talent in this film, I think, comes through too. And they only had 18 days to film this. Elizabeth Banks was apparently a trooper, filming every single day, back-to-back days, non-stop, and I think she's really, really great in this film. I think it's a little gem from 2024, Skincare. Go check it out if you haven't already. That's my number 5. Next up at number 4, another hot take. Why is this film so high on my list? I hear many of you shouting and screaming at me right now. Number 4 is Gladiator 2. And I think this is just a hell of a fun time of a film. Yeah, it's got lots of problems. I won't argue there with you if you've got your criticisms of this film. I'll probably struggle to defend myself on this one. But in a way, I don't care. I had a great time. I had a great time watching this. Now, very difficult, I think, to follow in the footsteps of someone like Russell Crowe for Paul Mescal, who was the lead in this film. I still thought he did okay, but Russell Crowe's performance as Maximus Decimus Meridius was always so commanding and passionate and confident. I think to follow in his footsteps is always going to be quite a challenge. But for me, what this film does really well, what Gladiator 2 does well, are all its action sequences and fight scenes. And for the first hour and a half, it didn't matter that the story maybe wasn't all that scintillating and, that there weren't that many interesting things going on in that way. The fight scenes, the action was just so intense and so much fun to watch. I was glued to the screen for most of this film, and I realised, 20 minutes from the end, I was like, is that nearly the end of the film, isn't it? We're getting to the end. Where's the time gone? A sign I really enjoyed Gladiator 2, and I do think this is a very divisive film. I can understand why it's getting a lot of dislike. I completely appreciate that. I love the original film. It's one of my all-time favourite films. I get why people are not liking Gladiator 2 one iota. But for me, if you treat it as just go in to have a bit of a fun evening like I did and have a good time, you'll get that with Gladiator 2 and then some for me. So that's why Gladiator 2 has made it as high as number 4. It's imperfect, but in a great way. Come on, sometimes you just got to have fun with these things, and Gladiator 2 is just a fun roller coaster. Coming in next at number 3, we've got Dune Part 2. Denis Villeneuve, he seems to continuously direct these epic visual sci-fi masterpieces, and Dune Part 2 is just another one to add to his collection of those kind of films. And this one absolutely, I think, is another superbly done film with great performances throughout the film, particularly from Zendaya. I actually think she is brilliant in this latest Dune film. And it's a 2-part adaptation, of course, of the Frank Herbert novel. And for me, it's the superior of the 2 films, actually, as well. I did enjoy Part 1, but I think I enjoyed this one just that little bit more. Only criticism with this, and why it's not number 2 or number 1 on this list, I would say, is that I felt the ending was just a little bit anticlimactic. I feel like I'm the only one that feels this about Dune Part 2. It just felt like a rinse and repeat of the first film. Now, I don't know the novel very well, so I don't know if that's exactly how things happen in the novel too. But for me, just felt like a rinse and repeat of the first part. And I was like kind of just a little bit dissatisfied with that. But overall, stunning film. Absolutely should be number 3 or even higher on my list, to be honest. But it sits here at number 3, Dune Part 2. Coming in next at number 2, we have got All of Us Strangers, starring Andrew Scott. This is a really emotional film, and I think even if you have the blackest of hearts, you'll find it hard to fight back the tears with All of Us Strangers. Andrew Scott delivering an absolutely humble and brilliant performance as the lead in this film. So what you've got here is a lonely guy living in a London flat. He forms a relationship with another guy, and but for me, the central focus of this film is actually with this guy's memory of his parents. And his parents in particular, before they died, he is seeing them almost as ghosts before they died, essentially. And him being their son is still living in the present day when he's visiting them. He's not travelling back in time, as it were, but he's visiting them almost in this sort of fantasy type setting. And it's incredibly moving. The scenes where he is talking to his parents when he knows what is going to happen to them, absolutely heartbreaking stuff. I mean, honestly, guys, you're going to really struggle to fight back the tears. Any of you, particularly, I think, who have lost someone that's close to you, and you'll feel this film is just absolutely seething with this kind of emotional tidal wave. And yeah, it's a brilliant film, All of Us Strangers. Can't recommend it enough. Absolutely superb stuff. At number 2. Coming in at number 1, we've got Anora. Anora. I should have given a bit more of a suspenseful build up to that, shouldn't I? But it's Anora at number 1. And Mikey Madison, again, rather like I said with Demi Moore in The Substance, she should be up for an Oscar for this ballsy performance that she does as a sex worker in this film as an escort who meets the son of a Russian oligarch. They get married quite quickly and chaos ensues once the Russian oligarch's family find out, and it's absolute carnage that's sometimes uncomfortable as well as funny. And I think, you know, this is one of those films that reminds me a bit of independent films where you feel like you're sort of on the road with a group of characters or you're travelling around with them. A little bit like Sebastian Schipper's Victoria from 2015, where you're in this sort of, you feel like it's almost like a real life documentary unfolding before you. And Nora, for me, feels a bit like that, but it feels also like a very fluid type of film, and very natural. And I think this is just maybe Sean Baker's style of directing that comes into this with Nora. But what a fabulous film. I've never seen anything like it, I think, actually, Anora. And for some people, you might not like the first 45 minutes of this film. It's not a family film, Anora, so don't think this is this is not a family film. The first 45 minutes are just non-stop sex almost. So, you know, just be aware of that with this one. But most of the film, I think, is actually really, really superbly done. It's stunning performances from everyone involved. Really clever stuff. Very thought-provoking. And that's Anora. As my number one film of 2024, and I'm going to say that I think it would probably beat even The Substance to my number one spot across every single genre we're talking about here. So that's saying something about what I think of Anora. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to drop a like and a subscribe if you're new to the channel. And yeah, got past 600 recently, 600 subs. So keep building on that. Let's keep the subs coming because you know, it's great to see a bit of growth on the channel. Until next time, bye for now.